Anyway, so just very briefly, I'm not going to take too long. I'll introduce our speakers. I'm going to start with Courtney, and then Jerene. She's Jerene? Oh, there she is. Sorry, and then Yaku. All right. And Courtney, you can move forward so long. Those of you who were at the conference on Friday would have heard Courtney share a little bit, and tonight she'll go a bit on a different route. But let me just say, Courtney is my colleague, and also someone I go to when I need help with my athletes, in testing them, etc., and giving me some advice. She helped me a lot with Mark. You've met Mark as well. So she helped me get Mark into a better space physically. So yeah, Courtney, looking forward to what you have to share with us, and you can take it further.
Okay, thanks, Andrew. Just before this, Sue and I were joking that I'm not going to go first, and apparently I am. Okay, evening, everybody. So I see a lot of familiar faces from Friday evening, which is great. I'll take my glasses off because it's new glasses, really, it's difficult on the eyes. So I think coming into this, I didn't really know what to expect. It's my first all-in-one conference. I think it's been really awesome. I unfortunately didn't get to catch the soccer game. I believe what you're saying. But I'm sure Cornerstone was the rightful winners of yesterday's game. Yes, so just a little bit more about who I am. So, like, as you can see on the screen, I've done quite a bit, but I think I'm quite a busy person. Of those who do know me, I do a lot. I don't know how. I'm really small. I don't know how I fit everything in me. But I'm a sports scientist, as what Andrew has said. I'm a girlfriend. I'm a family member, a sister to two older brothers. I think I'm just a rascal of all things. That's what the duty of the sister is to be a menace to the older brothers. But I think I've done a long journey throughout my whole life, trying to balance just general family responsibilities to work to sport. And sport's a big foundation of my life. It's been what I've been doing since, I think, pretty much my parents got me running down the street to go play with my friends, and it's really formed who I am today. I was never really a confident child, and I think it's really made me into who I am today. It's difficult to balance academics, work, and sport. And I think for any young sports people that are coming through the pathways, it can be done, but it's only done with good support structures, your family, through faith and those things. And I think we can't always paint a perfect picture for every sports person. We've always seen different trials and tribulations with people on social media and those things. But even in myself, I've lost faith in my sport. And that defining moment is how I tried to progress. I still remember that time when, after World Champs, it was 2019, I had a very long career in my sport, and I was tired. I didn't want to continue. I didn't want to be an athlete anymore. But my mom sat me down and said, "You've given so much to the sport, I need to continue in some form of manner." So she said, "Just try this one last competition. It's what you need to do to give back." And in the moment, I didn't really want to hear it. Being a young adult, you still want to challenge your parents. And she just said, "Do it. It's your way of giving back." And went through the competition, still feeling very unfaithful towards it, not feeling very motivated to continue. And then COVID actually happened, and obviously then it really makes you realize what's important. What is important to you? Obviously family during COVID was a big thing that we all needed to realize is important to our lives. Obviously letting God draw you through the pathway of how to move through this very difficult situation that what COVID was. And somehow we still continued our sport through the digital space. I don't know how, but we do need water for it. So they have really cool apps to still let us do artistic swimming on land. So it kind of worked, but it also made me maybe try and reaffirm my faith in my sport, try and look at other avenues to give back. And that was through coaching my younger swimmers as well as looking at officiating. And lo and behold, obviously the theme is Lord of the Rings and obviously Olympics and those things. And to be totally honest, Olympics was never my dream as an athlete. World Champs or just competing for my team or my province and my country was just enough, be it only to World Champs level. And obviously God had different plans for me coming through this whole experience. And obviously going through the officiating, being a technical controller and being one of the first once for the country was very daunting. A lot of the time, I didn't have faith in who I was and my own skills, but I had good support. Chris was a great support. My parents, my coach, my teammates, who really helped me realize I actually am worthy of this opportunity that God gave me. And then Olympics came about. I still didn't believe it was going to happen. There was 2 of us up for the position, and I said to my friend, it's going to be her. They've been selecting her the whole time. And it was never really on the horizon until one random Monday evening. I'm busy working, and I get a message, congratulations. And I'm like, oh, okay, what's this? Open the message, there's my name on a piece of paper. And I'm like, no, you're just joking. It's April Fool's joke. But it was May. So I was like, okay, it's clearly not an April Fool's joke. And in that moment, I had all these emotions. I was like, is this really happening? Till I actually got on that plane, I didn't believe it was happening. And obviously, I didn't know how I was going to prepare for this, but I always believe, and I stand by it for my whole life, everything happens for a reason. I went through the moment of losing faith in my sport, regaining the faith and my love for it. I took a long time to want to go back to competing. I'm competing again now as a masters athlete, and it took a lot for me to get back to that moment. And I think I had to just really relearn how to love my sport through my coaching, through the officiating, and how to give back in some form of manner. And that's my message I want to give to you all today, that everything happens for a reason. Yes, Olympics wasn't my end goal, but somehow God rerouted me towards that, and he was just trying to show me what I could give back and also open the pathway for other people in my position, in my sport, to reach that goal. I look at someone else. I watched her journey through the sport. I won't mention who she was, but I was there the day that she tried to qualify for Olympics as an athlete. I was one of the judges on the panel that was judging her. And I remember they swam their routine. There was 2 qualifying events, and they had come short by probably 2 points to win the first event. And I could see this devastation in her face, because those 2 points is what cost them qualifying. And that was one of her dreams. And I remember looking at her and just saying, you can still do this. You can still try and find a way to reaffirm your dream. And I think this new position and her now coming through it and being part of this new cohort, she'll still reach it. And I hope she truly believes that, because I think maybe then she wasn't ready and probably wasn't the right time for her. But I do believe that seeing that this pathway that we both are on now can carry her to that next dream. So everything really does happen for a reason. And God, sometimes we don't know what his plan is, but we just have to believe in him. And that's just what I wanted to share with you guys today. So yeah.
Thank you, Courtney. What Courtney didn't mention is that you've seen the medalist at the Olympics with synchro and aquatics. She was one of the judges deciding on who medals and who doesn't medal. So it was quite a big job. So you can give another round of applause. Thanks. Thank you, Courtney. I'm going to call on Jerene to come forward. This morning, Jerene shared very powerfully, and she had us in tears with a story. We'll get the tissues now, Jerene. It's close by, don't worry. And you'll see they're both similar in stature, but both very, very powerful in their own right. So, do you need? No. Okay.
But if I could get some water, please, if there's water. Thank you. Asseblief. Ooh, die keel is weer droog soos ek nou moet praat. Yeah. You know the tears are going to come, so yeah, I'll be ready for it, yeah. Good evening, everyone. I am Jerene Michaela Whiteboy. There's a reason why I'm saying both of my names, and it will be mentioned throughout me speaking. As you can see, I'm a South African judoka. As the pastor said this morning, a judoka, what is it again? A practitioner, that's it. I'm a South African judokan, 2-time Olympian, 3-time Africa champion, Commonwealth gold medalist. So there's a lot that I could mention from my career of judo. But all of that came with what God has put in my life and the sport that he's put in my life. because without him, I wouldn't be here. I started judo in 2006 at Boyson Spark Judo Club. And yes, I am proudly from Boyson Spark. I started judo 2006, Boyson Spark Judo Club. And I loved the sport immediately through a friend. And I saw that she was beating up the boys. So I took that up. I obviously had to ask my mom, and she had to sign my letter. And she did that, not knowing that it would be my life. I took up judo, and I did judo for about 3 years before I got the opportunity to go to Tucksport High School. So this is a school where I focused on judo and my academics. But coming with that decision, it was difficult for my mom. It is. Thank you. Every time I have to speak about it, I just get this knot in my throat. I don't think my mom really understands that the decision she made that day, it really changed my life. It really did. I know it was a difficult decision for her to make because she has lost her best friend and she's lost her partner. And as a widow, she had to send away her daughter. Sorry. She had to send away her daughter to attend a school that is so far away from home. But she had to put her trust in God and believe that He will make a way. And even though it was difficult for me, and I called her many times to come home, she would always tell me to pray. And she knew that the next day I would have the motivation to go back and just carry on with my life and the motivation that I had, because yes, at home I would have had a chance and she would have made a way for me, because that is the strength that my mom had. But she made that decision, and I think in my heart I also just didn't want to fail her. So I put on my big girl pants and I took that to that journey. But I believe that all of that happened for a reason. I am sure if my dad was still alive, he probably wouldn't have sent me to that school because we were so close. I even remember going with him to school at times, and I wouldn't even go to school. I would go with him and I would just sit in his class because he was a teacher. So, yeah, we were very close. But I believe that if it wasn't for that time, I wouldn't have done judo and I wouldn't have had all these achievements, and I would have been where I was. I would have had a different life. But even with that, I mentioned my names. So my mom's name is Minnie, and I think that's where Michaela comes from. And then my dad was Jerome, so that goes for Jerone. And Jerone is from a Greek origin. I Googled it. And it means guardian. And Michaela is, I'm not sure about the origin, but it means who resembles God. And only my mom could tell me why, or my dad, why they chose those names. But I believe that the guardian would stand for the sport that I'm doing. To be strong, to be a fighter, and to be a protector. And I think that's what my personality is. I always care for people. And then also who resembles God is just for the love that God has in my life, and also the way I live the sport. There's also just one other story that I would really like to speak about. I also spoke about it this morning. I've always prayed and I've always believed in God, but there's a moment in my life that I attended a competition and I've trained very hard for that specific competition, but I failed. I lost in the first round. I lost in the first round and I was very upset and I asked God, but why? Why am I training this hard and I'm not getting the medals that I want or that I feel that I deserve? And I was praying in my room, and it's as if God spoke to me and He said that you are wanting to do this sport and wanting these medals because of the worldly things that you want. You want people to see. You want the gratitude from the people. But you are not allowing me to use you on the judo mat. And from that day, my focus shifted from not wanting to win anymore, but to do the best in my sport so that I could make a change for young girls to see, for South Africans to see, for barriers to be broken down. And since that day, every single time that I've competed, I've always just prayed that God, when I step onto this mat, please use me. Use me today and use me on this mat so that I can show the people that you have given me this sport and it is through you that I am here today. So that is what I want to share today. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerene. Is your mom here, Jerene? Can we just acknowledge Jerene's mom and the sacrifices she's made? Thank you very much. Yeah, I see it's small, but powerful. So, yeah. So let's move on to Jaco Smith. Can we have a little bit more lights in the room for Jaco, please, just so we can see a little bit better? Just, yeah. Is this the brightest? Okay, he seems to be fine. Thanks. So for those of you who don't know, Jaco is a para athlete, and he competes. He started with a 1.5, then he moved to the 800, and then the 400, and now he competes in the 100 meters. And that's because they changed his events in terms of him Olympic participation. Am I right, Jaco? And then he's a T12 athlete. He will tell you more about what that means. And but Jaco is such an inspiration for me personally. I see Jaco work extremely hard every single day, very diligent, no excuses. He puts some of us to shame. Yeah, so Jaco, Mike is yours.
Thank you, Coach. Good evening, everybody. I trust that you are well. It's also well on my side. So, my name is Jaco Smith from a small town, not Los Angeles, Humansdorp. For those who were there on Friday night. Yeah, so I grew up in Humansdorp. I think most of us knows Humansdorp. Small rural area outside Port Elizabeth, where gangsterism, drug abuse, and alcohol abuse is at its highest. And I don't know how I made it, but I think it was only through the grace of God. And today, I just want to leave my favorite verse with you before I start. It is one of my favorite motivations in the Bible. It is 1 Chronicle 4 verse 10, where Jabez cried out to the Lord. He didn't ask for much. He only wanted God to enlarge his territory. And when I was a youngster, 12 years old. I'm not sure who in this room is familiar with the train race. Back then, there used to be a train race from PE to Luri. So in my primary school, those days, you will do cross country, you'll do everything, but train race was the highlight of the year. And I remember I was in today's days, it is grade 7, standard 5 died there. Yes, and I was training very hard, and I wasn't a pure talented athlete. Like Coach Andrew said, I knew I had to work hard because there was always this guy who was faster than me. But in those years in the train race, there was 10. It was a relay of 10 people, and we were like 20 guys that was fighting for those 10 spots. And I was right up there in the top 5. But the principal, our coach back in the day, and he hated me because I always stood up for myself. Like I mentioned on Friday, I used to get bullied a lot. And in primary school, I had no choice but to put the boxing gloves on just to sort everything out with the first. And I was always in the principal's office because of that, and he started to hate me because to him, I was the problem child. And the bullies were never the problem child. And I told him, until you tell them to stop, I will never stop. So he started to hate me. And I remember this day, the trainers was supposed to happen on Saturday, and on Wednesday, the final team will be announced. On a Wednesday. And he picked the team on the Tuesday, the provisional team on Tuesday, and my name wasn't there. He went to fetch a guy who stopped running because he knew he wasn't going to make it. The guy was number 11, and this Wednesday, this guy was playing rugby. But before we get there, so that night, I went to, we had a youth community. So I went to the youth community, and that night I was devastated because this is the highlight of my career. It's like going to the Olympics for me. And that night I lied down in front of God and I cried. And I asked him, why did you put me through all of these things as a 12-year-old boy? Why did you put me through all these things? People didn't understand why I was crying. I was crying because I'm not in the team, but they thought they thought like I'm high up there in the spiritual realm, but but I was crying because I'm not going to run the train race. But the next day, the principal asked me to go and look for this boy who was going to replace me. So I must now go and fetch this guy because he must come and train. And I'm an obedient guy, so I went to call him. His nickname was Punkin, so I was like, Punkin, the principal is calling you, you must run on Saturday. And he was like, nah, I'm not running. I haven't trained for a while, so I'm not running. So now I must relay this message. But before I went there, I was praying, like, this guy is not going to take my space. So we went on to run, and as I was running, as we were making the final turn, he just called out, Yaku, you're running on Saturday. And I was so happy. But so the reason why I'm sharing that story with you is, when I was a young boy growing up, I grew up in the church. My grandmother was a church lady in the evangelie. So I used to go to church. And there was a song called, Afrikaanse liedjie wat gesê het, Jabez se gebed is vergroot my grondgebied. And I never understood what they meant as a youngster. But I always, when they asked me to go and say something, I always used that song as an example. And as I grew older, I've realized when you ask God for something, yes, you ask God for something, but at the same time, you must prepare yourself for what you ask God. You can't ask for a BMW, but you don't have license. You must first ask God for your license. Yes, you ask God to enlarge your territory, but you must prepare yourself. So sometimes when God pulls through, you are like, yes, I asked this thing 20 years ago. Why now? You weren't ready 20 years ago. So we need to prepare ourselves. And I believe where I am today was through the sacrifices that I've been through to be where I am today. I told Sue, I never like to share about my success and everything. And she told me, you must share. People want to hear. So tonight I want to tell you something about me not being afraid, me trusting God, me using Jabez motivation as a motivation, his prayer as a motivation. In 2010, I lost my job. I think my salary was 4,000 rand a month, and I lost my job. My UIF was finished, and I was sitting at home, and I had a best friend. Whenever I'm broke in my pocket, not broken. Whenever I'm broke, my friend will come to me and he will give me some money, or when he's broke, I will because we had a feeling for each other. And there was this time in my life when I had nothing. And he didn't, I think it was part of God's plans, but he was very busy. For 2 weeks, I told myself, I am not leaving this house until God pulls through. So for 2 weeks, I never left the house. I was just sitting there. Luckily, there was World Cup cricket on, so I could watch cricket. From the cricket, my father told me, hey, you're going to eat all the food up here. You must go and look for a job for you. But he didn't know. Me and God had the deal. I'm not leaving this house until he speaks. And the second week, I just had something in me, like a feeling. And I decided, listen, you can't lie down here. So I got dressed, I put my suit on, I shined my shoes. I don't know where I'm going. Our town in Humansdorp is about 5 kilometers away from where I'm staying. So I walked all the way from my house to town. Now I'm standing on the corner there. The guys asked me, where are you going? I said, hey, I'm going for an interview. There's no interview. So that day, and I had a friend, I was singing in a community choir, so I had a friend who was a lawyer. So I told myself, hey, I told everybody now I'm going to an interview, so let me go to this guy. Let me pretend this is my interview. So I'm chatting, he's a pastor now, so I'm chatting to the pastor and just random chats. And then I went home again. The next morning, like 5 o'clock in the morning, there was a knock at the door. A pastor asked, listen, don't you want to sell newspapers? I said, yes, pastor. And I asked where? He said, no, in Jeffreys Bay. And it's winter. So, for me as a visually impaired person, I can't see in the dark. If I know the place, then it's like I see with my brains. So it was very difficult for me to sell newspapers. So what I did is, I decided, no, I'm going to sit until daylight, and then I'm going to sell my newspapers at a certain stop where they put me. I couldn't sell newspapers for a week. And I decided, listen, I'm going into the community now, and I'm going to ask the people, if I see somebody who's reading a newspaper, I will tell that person, where are you buying that newspaper? No, I buy this. I told them, listen, I will bring you a newspaper. So from that day on, I asked the pastor if he can drop me 3:30 in Jeffreys Bay in the morning. So what I did during the day, I will memorize every single customer's house, steps, everything in my head. Back then, I didn't have a smartphone. This is a fun fact of Jaco. So I had about 50 to 80 cell phone numbers in my head. I remembered all of those numbers just because I had the Knoppies phone, the Tilili phone that day. So I couldn't see the numbers because it was too small. So I had to. There was no phone book in my phone. It was just in my head. So I had to remember everything. And I remember there was a few times in Jeffreys Bay when the gangsters were sitting in early mornings, 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning, sitting on the corners. And here, I don't even know, up until today, I don't know who they was. But here was I coming with probably 200, 300 rand in my pocket. They thought I was a binar because newspaper people come from PE. So I was like, just like this there, away brew. I don't know even who the bruiser is, but away brew. So with my hand here underneath my pup, they thought I got a gun or something there. But I managed to, from making it, by the way, my salary a day was from 4,000 rand. My salary a day was 12 rand a day. And to me, it wasn't about the salary. It was about what does God have for me? What is the plan for me? Because I believe that wherever God put me, it's for a reason. Like tonight, there's a reason why I should be here. And I asked God, but why am I here? And I remember to make a long story short, from a 12 rand, I started to make 350 rand a week. I started to make like 1,500 rand in 2 weeks because of the grace of God. So what I'm trying to tell you is, yes, I am a Paralympian today. And I can share so many stories about my belief and my trust in God. There was this one day, I think I shared with one of the fathers on Friday night. When I hike from Humansdorp to Truck In, I didn't get money. So I had, I think, 80 rand in my pocket. Put 30 rand, I paid for the hike from Humansdorp, and the other 50 rand, I wanted to hike to Bloemfontein because there was a SA Open in Bloemfontein in 2016, and that was my last chance to qualify for the Paralympics. I didn't have a coach at that time, so I was coaching myself, and I knew that there's nobody that's going to stand out for me. There's nobody that's going to say, listen, Jaco, I want you to do this. If I didn't want to do what I wanted to do, then I was going to sit at one spot. So I nearly got shot that day. And then the Eastern Cape Academy, because I was on their radar, and they phoned me, and they asked me, where are you? And I told them, listen, I'm at a hiking spot. I'm busy hiking from PE to Bloemfontein. And they said, I want you to get away there now. And they paid for my bus trip to Bloemfontein, and they paid for my hotel in Bloemfontein. So that's what the Lord can do when you just put the first step forward. Amen. And what happened there? This is the thing. So I'm there, and there's this guy from Lesotho. He always beats me, and I'm tired of this guy. And now we're sharing a room. He's lying there smiling because you know he's the main man. You know. So while I was lying there, I told him, listen, man, do you trust God? Do you believe in Jesus? He said, no. I said, why? He said, no, I think they are the Zions. I don't know who they believe in. And I told him, let's make a deal. If I beat you tomorrow, then you will know my Jesus is alive. I've never beaten this guy. And if you beat me, then I will become a Zionist. So that was the deal between me and him. Yeah, I was I was lying there. I said, God, it's up to you now. That day, that morning, when I got up, I'm busy there on my spike. He asked me, what are you doing? I told him, I'm busy writing your message on the bottom of my shoe here. So I'm getting into his head now. That day, I beat that guy by 30 meters in the 400 meters. So, if you put your trust in Jesus, nothing can go wrong. Amen. That night, when we were lying there, almost done, coach. That night when I was lying there, I couldn't wait for this moment. I was lying there, now it's me who's smiling. And I told him, hey, my thought. You remember where the deal, ne? And he started to laugh. And I said, yes, I know now you know my Jesus is alive. Thank you.
What a storyteller, right? Thank you, Jacobaye, dankie. I think we can all agree we have some phenomenal athletes and people in our midst. Very down to earth, very humble. And I think for me, the biggest part is just that, their humility. They operate on a very high level, higher than what I could ever have achieved as an athlete, so I have huge respect for them. But yeah, I mentioned on Friday night, as Bruce gets ready, that out of 8.1 billion people in the world, only 0.0000017% makes it to the Olympics. Not as a spectator, as a competitor. All right? That's 1 in 500,000 people, if you had to do the calculation. So we are very privileged to have 3 of them with us tonight. So I think let's just give them all, again, a round of applause. Thank you. You'll see I'm wearing a t-shirt tonight that reads, that's correct. So as I'm wearing it deliberately tonight because the person coming up now, Bruce, is one such person. He always keeps the main thing the main thing. And we've known Bruce for some time. Very special to us here at Lighthouse, and I'm sure also now Cornerstone. And Bruce, would you mind joining me on stage, please? Do you also need the tissues? So I just want to present this to Bruce. Let me just show you quickly. Sorry.
Can we have those hankies?
Yeah.
Thanks for saving some, Jeremy. Okay.
So this is a sketch that Kelly, she couldn't unfortunately be with us tonight. She sketched this. And this was a photo taken of Bruce at his first All-In, wearing the King Power t-shirt. So it's very special to us. And Bruce, I hope it's special to you as well. And just in saying that, in the Bible it speaks about finding the man of peace. And Bruce is that person for us in the sporting community, the man of peace who makes the way for the gospel. So Bruce, we honor you and we thank you, and it's great having you with us.
Yeah, you might need to leave that there. Yako, where are you? Yako, I just want to say, when your athletics career is over, stand-up comedy. Okay? Just man, you can make people laugh. Just make sure you put the same amount of work in to execute in your craft as you have with your athletics. I also want to say this to you as well, that as I was listening to your story, I was reminded of Moses when he's taken to the people to the Red Sea. And they've got the Egyptian army coming up behind, mountains all around, and there's only one direction they can go in because they're trapped. And Moses gets really spiritual. And he says, it's okay, all we have to do is stand here and pray. And I see lots of people use that scripture, but they forget the next line. Because God rebukes him. Because God says to him, yeah, that's great, but what have I put in your hand? And what Moses had in his hand was a staff. And that staff represented the calling on his life. And God was saying, what have I put in your hand? And the invitation that God was giving to Moses was basically this: you do what you can, which is step forward with the thing that I've given you, and then I will do what you can't. And as I heard your story this evening, that's what I heard. You sold newspapers. You did what you could. And then God has gone and done in your life what you couldn't have done and opened up doors that are incredible. And I just want to honor that this evening and say, God, you are good, you are faithful. Keep on doing that in your life. Yeah, keep on doing what you can. Yeah, and God will continue to do what you can't. Okay. Jeremy, my verse for this evening, I'm not actually going to preach. I'm going to share a bit of testimony. But my verse for this evening is a father to the fatherless and a defender of widows. We've already honored Jeremy's mum this evening. But our God is not only a father to the fatherless, but he's a defender of widows. And it says God sets the lonely in families. I think Jacko mentioned this evening gangsterism in his community. Have you ever heard the story about the African gangster elephants? Have you ever heard that story? A number of years ago, rangers discovered a group of adolescent orphaned elephants running amok. And what happens to elephants is that when they get into adolescence, they go into this sort of must cycle. And for a number of years, they'll have, the male elephants will have this pus that runs down their hind legs. They can get a little bit aggressive, but when they're part of a herd, the male elder elephants keep them under control. But they discovered something with these gangster elephants. They were in a perpetual state of adolescence. The cycle didn't end. For years and years, they would have this pus running down their legs. They remained adolescents. The cycle didn't end. And not only that, their behavior got worse and worse and worse. There was an incident at one of the watering holes where one of these orphaned gangster elephants, with no provocation, decided to spear with their tusks one of the rhinos, lift it up and hold it underwater and drown it. There were regular fatal fights taking place between these elephants and destructive behavior, un-elephant-like behavior taking place wherever these gangster elephants were located. And the scientists didn't know what to do, and eventually they decided that maybe the best thing to do was to place older, more mature elephants, male elephants, amongst these gangster elephants. And something incredible happened. Within days, not weeks, not months, within days, the must cycle ended. There was a biological change in these elephants, and the pus stopped running down their legs. Not only that, within a short period of time, they were re-socialized into proper elephant behavior. Why? Because there were now fathers in the herd. Our God is a father to the fatherless. And I've spent much of my last 15 years coming alongside predominantly fatherless young men in sport. And we've got a crisis in this country. 60% of South African children are growing up without their biological fathers, even knowing them. In fact, it's getting worse. Recently, Home Affairs announced that 65% of present birth certificates don't even have a father's name on it. And God is calling the church to stand in the gap. Because the consequence of the lack of positive, active male presence in the lives of children is devastating in this nation. The reasons for it are complex. I'm not here to moralize. There are huge, complex reasons why we have a fatherless crisis in South Africa. But the implications are huge. Throughout the world, all the research shows that any child that grows up without the positive, active presence of a male figure in their home and in their life is much more likely to end up incarcerated and in prison. That might not be politically correct, but it's a sociological fact. In every society, they're more likely to suffer clinical depression. A girl child is more likely to be a victim of gender-based violence. A boy child is more likely to be a perpetrator of gender-based violence. Educational outcomes, sporting outcomes. Every single indicator in life shows that where there is not, hear me, the active, positive presence of a male in the life of children, the consequences are often devastating. Now, I want to make something quite clear. The first thing is that story doesn't have to be repeated in your life, and it doesn't have to be fatal. If you're sitting here tonight and that's been your story, it doesn't mean it has to be fatal. Second thing is, that truth does not mean that we want to undermine the incredible role that mothers, grandmothers, and aunties play in raising children in this nation. But the reality is that God always intended for men to play their part in the home. And when men are absent, we end up with gangster elephants. And we end up with abused and violated women. We've got a crisis in this country. And I've had the privilege over the last 15 years of just attempting as best I can to be one of those older elephants, standing in the gap for some young men. And I believe God is calling the church to wake up and say, where are the social fathers and the social mothers? Not just raising your own children, but standing in the gap for a generation of young people who are growing up without the very thing that God intended, the positive, active presence of a man and a woman in their lives. This cycle has to end. If we want to see healing and hope in this nation, it begins with the church saying, like our Father, we are going to be a father to the fatherless. We're going to be a mother to the motherless. We're going to stand in the gap. 18 months ago, Heartlines produced a series of 6 short films. They're 24 minutes long. They were broadcast on SABC. You can find them on YouTube. Brilliant dramas under the theme Fathers Matter, set in different cultural contexts, exploring through drama the father crisis in South Africa, not moralizing, not oversimplifying, but through, if you like, edutainment, creating stories that would enable discussions to take place. I saw these films and thought, do you know what? I'm going to use these at Stellenbosch Football Club with the footballers I'm working with. And what I'd like to do now, if possible, is just put on the screen 6-minute short documentary that was filmed that captured what happened at one of our professional football clubs as a result of us showing these films and creating space for our young men to begin to explore their own stories, but also begin to think about the stories they're going to write for themselves in the future.
My name is Devin Titus. I'm 22 years old, play with Stellenbosch FC, and I'm a attacking player. Football is my getaway. If I have problems at home, step onto a pitch and everything goes away. I think you've heard the rule for us. Football is a sport where you can express yourself in different types of ways, you know. My name is Oletu Makanya. I play centre back for Stellenbosch. Soccer has been something I've always wanted to do because it makes me very happy.
My name is Obolwake Sibande. Yeah, I play for Stellenbosch. My position is left wing back. I love football from the young age. That's where I'm free play. That's where I also met friends.
Stellenbosch Football Club is one of the amazing clubs that is doing very well in the PSL at the moment.
My name's Bruce Nadine and I'm the sports chaplain at Stellenbosch Football Club. High-performance sports people are more likely to experience divorce. They're more likely to experience dependency on drugs, alcohol, gambling. They're more likely to experience depression.
So as much as they've achieved so much in terms of their athletic ability, it was important for us to say, as you grow in your sport, as you grow in your football, you must also grow holistically.
I think football is not only about on the pitch, it's also your brain, how your brain works, your body, and it's all mentally and socially combined, you know, everything works together.
A lot of the boys come from disadvantaged communities. Some have had positive experiences with fathers, some have had negative experiences with fathers, some have had complete absence of fathers.
My life growing up was all about staying inside, you know, not communicating or going out too much and hanging with the wrong crowds. Gangs are an issue everywhere in our area, you know, so it's around the corner, it's everywhere, so you usually have to stay away from them and not even look at them.
The reality is that what you see out on the field is like the tip of an iceberg. 90% of what's really going on in a person's life is actually underneath the water. And so in the end, actually, it's seeing them make positive life choices. So I heard about Fathers Matter and could immediately see that it would fit into our More Than Football program. So we've ended up having 2 cohorts of 22 players who have completed the Fathers Matter course. And the way it's been run here, in each of the sessions, we'd watch the film and then they'd be split into groups with some guided questions, and then we'd come back and have a conversation. So gents, we're just going to be carrying on today with our Fathers Matter series, and today you're going to be watching a film I know you're all really going to enjoy. It's about a father who has to spend a lot of time away from home, but how he still remains actively present in the life of his daughter.
Films kind of ignited a lot of memories for them. The films triggered a lot of issues that they had to deal with in their own lives about their own journeys with their fathers. And it gave them a sense of commitment to living a different kind of future from what they see as men in society?
I don't know much about my father. He's a policeman. I've met him few times. When he passed away, I was 13 or 14.
My father has been present, like, he's my role model, basically, yeah. He was my coach since I was a small boy. He was the one that taught me about football, you know, everything I know right now is because of him. I grew up with my father, both mom and dad. My father was very important to me because he is the one who actually was motivating me to go play football at the high level, because I used to only play in the streets with the other kids, but he was the one who was taking me to the fields to get a proper team. Fathers Matters program was a great help for me in my pursuit to becoming a father one day. Fathers Matter program has helped me a lot, you know, in my life, because there was a lot of things that I didn't know that involved fathers in our society, you know.
I can tell that having a father is really important, even though I grew up with no father.
One of the things that I learned in the film is that sending money back home doesn't really make you a good father, especially to the child. You know, the child needs you.
It's amazing how the players reacted to it and responded to the films, because they are human, they are holistic themselves. They've got fatherhood experiences.
As a father, you don't have to be rich as long as you're there for your child. Be there physically, that means a lot.
It makes me want to be a present father, and it makes me to be like patient with everything, not rush into getting a child or anything. The film that stood out for me was the In Time film. The words that he said to her was start strong and finish stronger. That's something that I took from in my career also. And it reminded me of something that my father told me of working hard. No matter what you do, work hard in it. And I feel like when I'm not working, I always remember that words that he told me.
Isn't it wonderful to see young men who can influence their communities? You know, for Devon, who grew up with his dad, he was able to, through these films, actually recognize for the first time just how crucial his father's role had been. I mean, since then, he's gone on to play for the national team. Yeah, he's won a major trophy. But that's nothing compared to the impact that this has had on him. Him recognizing his father's own role in getting him where he is today, and the man that he's becoming. For a young man like Ulweto, hearing him say that he's not in a hurry to have a family. In fact, for him, it was recognizing that actually he needed to be in a stable relationship before he even started one. Stable, loving relationship, because actually it made him realize that that's the best place to raise a child. You know, and for Sibande, well, he didn't grow up with a dad, but watching the dial move for him to a place where he can now say, I'm not going to accept the script that I received. I want to write a different one. Fathers matter, and I want to be present in the lives of any children that I have in the future. We had amazing conversations afterwards. I created space for all the guys to have one-on-ones. And I was staggered at some of the things that they obviously weren't going to share in the group, but they shared with me. There was one young man who I knew that his father had died when he was about 11. But in this moment, in this opportunity, he was able to share with me what had really happened. It was something only he, his mum, and his sister knew about. And that was the real reason his father had died. His father had committed suicide. And they hadn't told the rest of the community or anyone else in the family because it was a source of shame. But what do you think happened? That meant they never talked about it. And he had no permission to talk about it. And here's an 11-year-old boy, now 19, 20 years, of age. And he's never been able to process the reason his father's not here anymore, because we're not allowed to talk about it, because it's this source of shame. What do you think that did to him? Because if any of you are here and you've experienced a loved one or a friend commit suicide, one of the first things you do is go, why didn't I know, or couldn't I have done more? It's just a natural instinct, isn't it? What do you think that does to an 11-year-old? Wasn't I enough for my dad? Wasn't I a big enough reason for him to hang around? Wasn't I a big enough reason for him to live? Maybe it's my fault he's not here anymore. These films created the opportunity for him to begin to process that wound and take that journey towards healing. Another young man told me that his father had played a huge role in his life, and it was a big reason behind encouraging him in his football. His father always would go to the field after work to watch him train, would do his very best to be at his games. And just as he turned pro at 18 and left home, his mum and dad split up. And his father ended up 4 hours away from the family home, and he got a younger brother and sister. And whenever his father came to town, he didn't visit his younger siblings. And he told me what he did as a result of watching these films. He was so troubled about the way that his siblings were not experiencing what he'd experienced growing up. He decided to call his father. Now, I don't know about you, in any culture, that's a tough thing to do, right? Right? For a younger man to approach an older man, but especially in many African cultures. It's a really tough thing to do. But he called his father. And I can't believe how wise he was for a 20-year-old. He called his father and he said, Dad, I just want you to know what you've done for me. As I grew up, you were always there for me. You always encouraged me in my football, and that's why I'm a professional footballer today, because you showed up, Dad. And then he asked his dad the question, so when you come back to town, why don't you go and see my brother and sister? And do you know what his father said? His father said, because I've got nothing to give them. I haven't got any money to give them. I've got no gifts to give them. You see, his father had believed the lie that the only role of a man is to provide. And this 20-year-old professional footballer, because he'd watched these films, would say, first of all, I'll take care of the provision, Dad. You take care of showing up. They need your presence more than they need possessions and stuff. I'll sort that out. And every time I see him, I always say, is your dad showing up? And he says, my dad's still showing up. He's put right what had gone wrong, and he's starting to be that active, positive presence. Whatever's gone on between mum and dad, it doesn't mean that he has to abandon his role in the life of his children. I could share many other stories. I was sitting up in a stand at a game not so long ago, and a young man that I'd worked with from the age of 15, he's gone on to play for the national team. He's at Mamelodi Sundowns, and he was sitting up in the stand because he was injured, and I checked in. Known him for a long time. I've discipled him. He grew up in a home where actually there was no dad around, because his dad was in prison for the first 9 years of his life because his dad was a gangster. And then his father came out of prison and he was around for about 6 months. And then his father was murdered when he was like 9.5, in gang violence. And so he's grown up without having a father at home, but along the way, God had put fathers in his life. I was one of them. But here we are, 10 years after we'd met each other, 11 years after we met each other, sitting up in the stand, and I'm checking in with him. I'm saying, what's going on in your life? And he starts telling me about this girl that he's dating. And so I asked him the question. I said, do you think this is heading towards marriage? And he said, Mr. Bruce, I believe this is heading towards marriage. I said, that's wonderful. And then he said to me, but I'm scared. I said, why are you scared? He said, I'm scared because I'm not sure I know how to be a husband. Of course, he doesn't know. On one level, he didn't, because he grew up without a father. He grew up without seeing how a man should be a husband to his partner, to his wife. And then I said, hold on a minute. Hold on a minute. You might not have grown up with a father in the home, but how many healthy marriages have you hung around with? And he was able to remember the house parents in the soccer school he was at. He was able to remember one of the coaches and his marriage. He was able to remember the time he spent in my home with me and my wife, just watching our interactions, seeing how we did, what we did. You see, we learn so much, don't we, from what we see, don't we? What we experience, not just from what people tell us. Yeah? I know there are so many things in my life that I instinctively do, not because of what my father said to me, but because of what my father did. My father never objectified women. My father never raised his voice at my mum, right? He never used violence. For me, that's the most natural thing in the world. I don't objectify women, and I would never shout at my wife. Why? Because my dad modeled that. He never told me that. And so here's this young man sitting there thinking that he's been disabled by his life experience, but the truth is God had placed examples in his way. And so I want to ask you today, as the people of God, and especially to the men in the room, right, will we become the older elephants? Will we stand in the gap? Who is God calling you to make space for? We have millions of children growing up in this country without fathers. And they're becoming gangsters, and they're becoming drug addicts, and they're becoming violators of women. And God is calling the church to take its place. And especially the men in the church, not just to take the place in your home, but to take it in the communities. Our young men especially, but our young women too, need mentors. They need godly examples. And God is calling us to rise up and be that example. If we want to see healing in this nation, healing of the father wound, it starts in this room with those who have been born again, filled with the spirit of sonship, of adoption, so that we can create space so people can find family. Would you take up that challenge? Would you seek God to see what that means for your life, so the curse of fatherlessness can begin to be pushed back and broken in this land? Thank you for listening. God bless.